Hello and welcome to this short video about Jaguar XK8 Coolant Tower upgrade. This is using the inlet manifold lift method as suggested by Bob, Motorcarman from the Jaguar Forums. Thank you, Bob. Now this is episode 33 of my series of short videos explaining how I upgraded my cam chains and tensioners. And in this video I'm explaining how I changed the coolant tower and a few tips and things that I find along the way or the way I did it that might help other people. So first of all, why? Why? Because these are old cars now, 25-year-old plastics, don't last forever. They can degrade and crack. I think in my particular car, they'd already been replaced by the previous owners, but I took this opportunity to replace them for aluminium ones. Obviously, they're not susceptible to degrading over time. I thought it was a good practice. Okay, so the tools I used was a torque wrench, a universal bit, 10mm, 8mm socket, a short lever, pipe grips, a ratchet, 10mm Allen key socket, an Allen key for tightening the back bolts, and a screwdriver. Okay, so I lost quite a bit of coolant when I was doing this, about 4 litres. I topped up with red coolant, well, it's actually orange, with a mix of 50%. I diluted it with deionized or soft water at the best. The spec you need for these cars is WSS M97B44D. It's a 4-stroke Jaguar spec. Any coolant antifreeze with this spec on is good enough for this car. Okay, so you need to get ready to release this coolant, ideally with buckets or drip trays underneath the car, but you also need to protect any electrical items, in particular fan motors and the alternator, because when you do take these hoses off, it will come out in uncontrollable fashion. With the best preparation possible, once it starts coming out, it'll splash everywhere. Bit of forewarning. So first of all, remove the thermostat hose right in front there, get your pipe grips in, take that off, and prepare for the release. Now we need to consider then how to release the main mounting bolts for the tower. The problem ones are ones at the top here. You can hardly see them because they're underneath the inlet manifold. Great design, completely inaccessible. People I think you can just about get a closed foot in there, but it'll only be a C-shaped one. So if you get any rounding of the nuts, you're going to be in big trouble. So the best thing is to try and get a socket on that. In order to do that, you need access. And Bob's method is actually to lift the inlet manifold out of the way. So this is what we're going to get into. Okay, so before we do that, we need to get rid of all these ancillary bits and bobs. So you need to take off the 2 electrical connectors, just squeeze them in there in that tab there, pull them straight off, no problem. Release these 2 pipes, the pipe back to the header tank, and this pipe here, this pipe clamp, just move up the hose with your pipe grips. I release the temperature sensor. You squeeze this part of the sensor here and pull it straight off. I actually also release this coolant pipe. It gives you a bit extra access here. There's no coolant in here anymore because it's all drained away, so it's no real big deal. These pipe clamps come off really easy and they're easy to put back. I'd advise to move that out of the way. Now these are female electrical sockets. They're quite tricky to get off. You have to get a screwdriver in here, release the tab. I didn't realize that until I actually snapped both sides off. Not that it makes a lot of difference. I'm not going to refit this to anything, but it's impossible to get at this nut really without that out of the way, unless you want to cut all your knuckles. Okay, so this photograph, apologies, it's a little bit out of focus. You can see that back nut there. These are the problem ones. You can see the inlet manifold here. There's not enough access above it to get a socket on, and there's not enough access through the gap here between the engine and the tower to get a spanner. Well, you can get a spanner in there, but you can't move it enough to turn the bolt. Okay, so what I did then, I actually released the 2 front bolts. They're really easy to get at, plenty of access vertically. And now getting into the moving the inlet manifold out of the way. So first and foremost, the warning here is you need to have all the dirt and debris out of the way as much as possible. So I used compressed air and a rag as best I could to blow all the dirt away from the sealing area. You've got to lift it off on the engine, because what you don't want is when you lift this manifold up is to get lots of dirt and debris in there that when you tighten it back down will cause leakage. So clean it the best you can. Then take all 10 of these bolts out. Very, very easy to get at, very, very simple. They're not torqued up very high. Jobs are good. Then very, very gently and slowly, I use the lever against the cam covers, alternately both sides, just to quietly lift this up with a view to just lifting the front up and keeping the back down. This way, the seals stayed in place in the plastic manifold and it raised the front up roughly about an inch. You can see here the gap, typical gap I got. It's about 25 millimeters or an inch. You can see the seals actually still maintained in the plastic inlet manifold. Not the greatest cleanliness of seal surface, but I think it's good enough for what we want. Fingers crossed. Now you can see the access for the universal joint here. It's just about enough to get in there, and you can just get this bar vertical enough to put enough pressure on there not to round off that bolt. Even with the socket, these bolts are really tight, to be honest. I'm surprised how tight they were. I can't imagine you getting anywhere with a C-spanner, to be honest. Okay, so you can take both off using that method. That's basically the main critical point of the whole job, getting those two back bolts out. Now we'd look to make some improvements. So we need to clean off the seal surface, put the tower back on, the new aluminium tower, hopefully never going to fail. Push it on this front hose, drop it into position. Then the main improvement is the back bolts. Instead of the hexagon heads, I used Allen key cap screws, 8.8 rated, no problem with strength, and they're a little bit easier to access. So here we go. It was easier to access, but I couldn't get enough access to put my torque wrench on. So I did approximately to 13 Newton meters, as best I could. Both on there, no problems, and I tightened up the front ones with my torque wrench to 13. So basically the tower's down. Now I actually lowered the inlet manifold very, very slowly and gently. There's no point rushing this. You've just got to lower it gently. You don't want anything banging and dislodging anything. Lowered it very, very gently back into place. It doesn't really fight you. And then I actually tighten up all 10 bolts back up again with my 10mm socket, and I tighten them all up to 22 Newton meters. There isn't any torque sequence in a Jaguar manual, but my recommendation is to torque the 2mm bolts up and then work diagonally out from that middle to the outside, as is done on all the other plastic parts bolted to this aluminium engine. Okay, so you've got the tower bolted in position. You need to make sure now the thermostat is located correctly. Now the spring portion needs to be inside the tower, so make sure you load that properly with a new O-ring. And a word of warning, the new towers come with a nice cap that isn't probably torqued up correctly. Double check that that's torqued down. Last thing you want is the coolant coming out of there unexpectedly. Another tip is probably to take that off while you're topping it up, because I think it can release some of the air traps. But don't get too excited of the rate of filling, because it'll just spew out of that without any problem. Okay, so then you've got to fit your thermostat cover back on. Again, 8mm socket, 10 Newton meters, 3 bolts, and refit all the hoses and top it up, as I said before. The refill procedure very, very quickly is fill up the header tank to the filler neck, let it settle for 2 minutes, squeeze the hoses on the front radiator, helps to get some of the air out. Now then, with the heating and the air condition off, run the engine until the fan starts. So basically make sure the engine gets up to temperature, and then with the engine running, turn the heating and air conditioning on to maximum. This gets puts all the fluid coolant through the heater matrix and forces all the air out of that as well. If the heating and the aircon are okay, obviously you've got all the air out, switch the engine off, wait for it to cool, and then top it up once it's cooled, probably the day after. Okay, that's how I did my header. Coolant tower upgrade. Thank you for watching. Hopefully it was informative. Please like, comment and share. And best of all, please subscribe if you'd like to see more XK8 videos.